Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here. Sorry about the noise you may hear, guys. That's my fan on because since it's June, it's starting to get really hot in my area. So now it's back to the season where I have my window open and the fan on over my window. So yeah, to let the air in, because I've been having some really uncomfortable sleeps lately due to how boiling hot it's starting to get because we're entering summer now. So yeah, but the point is, I'm here with a brand new video, a follow-up to the one I did yesterday, which was the top 11 worst sequels. Now this is going to be the same kind of list, except now it's going to be covering the top 11 best sequels, in my opinion. Since sequels in general, anyways. So yeah. Till then, let's get started with what will obviously be at number 11. Kicking off at number 11 is Avengers Infinity War. Now, okay, I get it. A lot of people argue that Endgame is the better film of the two. While I think they are both equally good, I find Infinity War slightly superior. Because it was like this meticulous planned film down to the last detail where you can see how much love is behind it. It's like, of course, the film delivers impressive show values and action, but it is all above the interactions of the characters that are well thought out, and surprisingly, no character is neglected. And all the storylines of the previous films are brought together amazingly logical. All the character subplots are handled very well and equally balanced. And easily, this movie probably has one of the most shocking cliffhangers ever since Empire Strikes Back. This made me realize how people felt when they first watched Empire Strikes Back in cinemas back when it first came out. I wasn't around that time because I wasn't born that year. After the movie, I was just sitting in the theater, so shocked at. And I actually saw this movie 2 more times in the theaters. And for this kind of sequel, I don't think any cliffhangers currently today are going to top something like this or Empire. No way. Kicking off at number 10 is Mad Max Fury Road. Now, this is one of those sequels that were released over 20 years too late. And it really works. Mad Max Fury Road, which stars Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, was pretty much George Miller's attempt to reignite his long-dormant Mad Max franchise. And my god, does he ever well deliver. During that whole entire 2010s, with the exception of John Wick, the Bourne trilogy, and The Raid, action movies were pretty much struggling to capture the excitement and enjoyment genre once held. A technically that classics from the 80s and 90s had in spades. George Miller single-handedly delivers our saving grace with Fury Road on this back of a spike-covered oil rig with a blind zombie playing a fire-breathing electric guitar. I really liked what they handled this movie. This movie's kind of mostly just a car chase through a desert, but they handle it so well. It's not just any typical car chase. It's kind of one you are just in awe from start to finish. So, final verdict, Mad Max Fury Road is a beautifully chaotic display of masterfully executed action sequences with a strong emotional core and a raw energy unmatched by nearly all of its action genre competition. Kicking off at number 9 is Blade Runner 2049, another 30 decades later sequel. Now, I'm not too big of a fan of the first film, but I find the sequel way better. When you make a sequel to a 30-year-old movie, you better do it right. And unlike a certain other sequel to a 30-year-old film that also includes Harrison Ford, Blade Runner 2049 respected its elderly predecessor while also giving a good continuation of its scenes and expansion of the universe. Its tone and style by way of its precise filmmaking, music, and deliberate use of color to convey feelings all do an excellent job in immersing us in the Blade Runner setting again and making something great technically. And it definitely nails the atmosphere, and this is exactly how decades later sequels should be. Especially with Top Gun Maverick recently. And man, it's a shame we have not had a third one of this. Kicking off at number 8 is Toy Story 3. Usually, it is rare for a third movie to be the best of the series, but Toy Story 3 manages to succeed in doing so. Pixar's magic always seemed to work because they managed to mix a good story with nice comedic elements and great emotional moments. Basically, the goal is to explore human feelings by presenting us with a beautiful animated world where anything can happen, and the balance between real-world conflicts and imaginary existence was mostly the secret behind Pixar's success around this era. So it was no surprise that Toy Story 3 not only buys this, but they may have the best execution of that idea. Now, this was a perfect way to wrap up a whole entire era where so many 90s kids that grew up with Toy Story 1 and 2 were able to have their childhoods wrapped up before heading off to college. It was a good way to end the Toy Story franchise, and this, to me here, will always be the true end to the franchise for me, and so it's just a beautiful way to end it. 2, they go even darker, they go even more emotional, but all in all, Toy Story 3 is one of those third installments that will always be superior. Kicking off at number 7, another third installment on this list, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Pretty much another rare good third installment of the franchise. When the two greatest filmmakers in the world teamed up to create one of the best action movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it seemed unlikely that they could duplicate their divinely inspired work. After a somewhat miss with the less praised Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Last Crusade comes pretty close to doing just that. Like this movie even stands by itself in the way it deals with spirituality and stick with kind of religious streams throughout without preaching to you. This is a very difficult balance to achieve in any film, and that alone makes this film stand out as just brilliant. It is more abundant with humor than the previous two films without the characters falling to irritating self-parody like today they probably would. And being a sequel, this is really difficult balance to achieve as well. Like, it even to me will always be the true ending of the franchise because I really like how the sequel reunites Indy with his dad, and they pretty much both learn that the Grail was not the treasure they were looking for the whole time, but the real treasure was actually working together and just each other in general. Now that's a genius way to end your franchise, until they made Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. God. Kicking off at number 6 is our last third installment on this list, and that is Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Now, Lord of the Rings is one of those rare trilogies that has 0 bad films and all the movies are equal masterpieces. I love Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers equally, but Return of the King is a final piece that brings everyone together. This movie even has one of the most emotional last hours of any film. No matter how many times I watch the franchise, I always get emotional with my friends. You bow to no one. It just gets me every time, and the last thing I'd even like to add is that I feel like this whole movie makes me feel like I'm part of the whole journey, and I feel sort of empty after watching it. Like, what's more is that this was pretty much the film that's caused Lord of the Rings to be considered a massive achievement in filmmaking, got Peter Jackson the Best Director Oscar, and this movie even won all 11 Oscars it was nominated for, and was the second sequel to win Best Picture since The Godfather 2. Even if fans scream to this day years later, fans still cheer at the final battle of this movie, and the 3-hour runtime of theatrical and the 4-hour runtime extended are all worth it. No other franchise finale is ever going to top something like this. Kicking off at number 5 is Aliens. Pretty much known as James Cameron's next big breakout success after 1984's The Terminator. This sci-fi movie, which is a sequel to the 1979 horror film Alien, is nearly perfect in every way, with storyline, characters, menacing threats, suspense, action, direction, music, emotion, etc. Like, this has always been my favorite Alien movie, and it always will be. Well, that's not saying much, but considering that the rest of the movies just pretty much either stinker or just mediocre. To me, this is not really just a film, it's also an experience. The adrenaline pumps like in no other film, and rarely have we ever had the chance to see a heroine as compelling as Ellen Ripley. She can just seeing her kick the Alien Queen's ass at the end and still keep a heart and soul. The fact that Sigourney Weaver didn't win an Oscar for this back in 1986 is just baffling. When the action starts, you're pretty much in for one wild ride, and I always like to accept Aliens as the true end to the Alien franchise. Kicking off at number 4 is for another James Cameron sequel, and that is, of course, Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Another great James Cameron sequel, being a follow-up to his big breakthrough success from 1984. This is definitely the greatest of the Terminator franchise, though that's once again not saying much. I've watched this film so many times since I first saw it in 2008, and have not found anything that Cameron could have improved on. This movie is a masterpiece in every aspect of film. Schwarzenegger's acting is easily his best performance of all time. He isn't supposed to show emotion or feelings in this. He's kind of a machine. I hate almost every one of his movies besides his... Shameless Pipe was kind of one of the last great films he really did. The special effects are incredible beyond belief, and the shape-shifting T-1000 is some of the greatest animation I've witnessed in cinema history. It absolutely blew my mind when I first experienced this visual extravaganza. The animation looked so real as well. And the movie includes some fast-paced action along with some clever sci-fi drama and horror. And the idea of a vast army of machines taking over the world after sending off warheads to every major city should be pretty scary enough. And And the T-1000 has very little lines and it's just creepy enough to make anyone twitch when you see him. And I really love the emotional ending, and like with Aliens, I also accept this movie as the end of the Terminator franchise. Kicking off at number 3 is The Dark Knight. I think that I could wax lyrical, but this movie all day. Like, it is just absolutely incredible from start to finish. This is still the best comic book movie of all time. This is the Dark Knight trilogy's second outing. It's filled with hard-hitting action. Almost every scene is absolutely enthralling to watch. The story is really good. The twists and turns keep the viewer constantly on their toes, especially in the third act of the movie. There are so many memorable scenes packed throughout this movie, so many quotes that I just sprinkled throughout that you could probably analyze it for hours. And while the action and story is incredible, it's the dynamic between the Batman and the Joker that really makes this movie what it is. It is all in contrast between the two, right against wrong, chaos and anarchy versus order, and the Joker's the perfect villain for Batman. And Batman is literally, as I said in this movie, pretty much a symbol, the very essence of the idea that Batman is centered around order, rules, and moral codes, and pretty much the embodiment of what is right. And the Joker challenges the very core and foundation of who Batman is and what he stands for. And I could probably go on further about how great I think this movie is, but I'll say this. I would definitely just watch this movie straight away if you have not seen it. This will always, and is still the best comic movie of all time. Kicking off at number 2 is my favorite sci-fi movie of all time, The Empire Strikes Back. Easily the best of the original Star Wars trilogy. This movie has so much going from it, a wonderful plot, equally good script with some brilliant lines, even actor Harrison Ford joining with a line or two of his own, and special effects to match. This one was a glowing example of why people love the trilogy so much. And since George Lucas passed on the major responsibilities for this film, we are given a more professional, well-made film for our attention, and Lucas's vision is better off for it. With its recent remastering, with so many remasterings, it's also the only film of the trilogy to not be down, one of the only films of the trilogy to really get the dark tone very well. Extra images, and as a result, the film appears to be no different from its original self, darker and more mature, as well. The sequel is better than the original Stars because it isn't so black and white. And it presents the evil Darth Vader as a more balanced individual. We don't quite have the confused Vader of the final chapter, but we are at the beginning to get signs that he isn't quite as we expected in that first film, where he was just that. We thought he was just that evil Sith Lord, and it turns out this movie shows him as just more than that. And not to mention, I think we all know that this movie gets the best cinematic twists in films of all time as well. And most obviously, the number 1 best sequel of all time to me is, you guessed it, The Godfather Part 2. The Godfather Part 2 is possibly the best sequel ever made. Every part of this film is amazing. It's even better than the original film. I was very surprised by this. The story is amazing. Everything makes perfect sense. The off-screen screenplay is amazing. The dialogue is some of the most original and realistic ever put on screen. The characters are flawless, and it's in every way perfectly written. The acting is just as fantastic too. Francis Ford Coppola does a better job than he did in The Godfather 1. The visual effects are so much better than the amazing ones in the original Godfather, although both films' visual effects are all perfect. So yeah, this sequel in general, I don't have much else to say about it, but it's just one of the best films ever along with the first film. Definitely a must-see, a very example of a flawless film. And there we go. That covers up my top 11 best sequels. I actually am thinking of doing a top 11 underrated sequels next, because I still think there's some sequels that are not as well received, but deserve some better but actually do deserve some better praise because they're actually pretty good sequels. So yeah. And I'll be putting honorable mentions in the comments below. Speaking of the comments below, let me know in the list your top 11 or top 10 favorite sequels in the comments below. I would love to hear everybody else's top 10 or 11s. And until then, that'll be it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. And if you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.